Daphne's father always told her that a foolish man moves his pieces to win a point. A wise woman moves her pieces to own the board. Dong-wook thought he was playing her. He forgot who taught him how to roll the dice. Standing on the rain-slicked stones of the Pont d'Arts in Paris, Daphne watched the man she loved wrap his arms around another woman. The soft blue silk of Nari's dress fluttered in the autumn wind as Dong-wook leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips, promising her a future built on Daphne's grave. He thought his secrets were buried deep in Seoul. He thought the American heiress he married was too soft, too blinded by love to notice the missing millions, the forged documents, and the slow poison of his betrayal. But as Daphne stepped out of the shadows, her eyes cold as ice, she pulled a small gold key from her purse. In less than 24 hours, everything Dong-wook owned, every asset, every guard, every street in Korea, would belong to her. He thought he was the hunter, but he was about to realize he was already in the cage. Before we dive into this high-stakes tale of betrayal and power, drop a comment below and let us know where you are watching from today. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another thrilling story. The rain over Seoul always felt different to Daphne. It fell heavy and precise, washing over the glass towers of the Gangnam district like a velvet curtain. Inside the penthouse suite, the air smelled of expensive espresso and fresh white lilies. Daphne sat gracefully near the floor-to-ceiling windows, wearing a long silk robe the exact shade of a ripe peach. She cradled a warm cup of coffee in her hands, her eyes fixed on the city skyline below. She looked like the picture of absolute peace, a beautiful woman enjoying a quiet morning in her husband's kingdom. But beneath that calm exterior, her mind was calculating every single variable. Footsteps echoed softly against the dark hardwood floor. Dong-wook stepped into the room, adjusting the cufflinks on his sharp white tailored suit. He looked every bit the powerful syndicate boss he was. Confident, handsome, and completely in control. He walked up behind Daphne, placing a light, warm hand on her shoulder, leaning down to press a soft kiss against her cheek. "Morning, my love," Dong-wook said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "You are up early today." Daphne turned her head, offering him a gentle, loving smile that reached her eyes just enough to seem genuine. "I could not sleep," she replied softly, her voice carrying a sweet, warm tone. "The rain kept me awake." "You look very handsome today. White suits you." Dong-wook smiled, feeling that familiar sense of pride. He adjusted his sky-blue silk tie, looking at his reflection in the glass. "I have to look the part," he said, turning back to face her. "I came to tell you that I have to leave earlier than expected. The shipping routes in Singapore are having issues again. The elders want me there personally to negotiate with the port directors." Daphne lowered her coffee cup, letting her dark eyes meet his. "Singapore again," she murmured, a soft hint of concern in her voice. "You were just traveling last month, Dong-wook. You are working yourself to death for this syndicate." "I have to, Daphne," Dong-wook said, reaching down to take her hand in his. He squeezed it gently, looking down at her with what appeared to be genuine tenderness. "Everything I am building, I am doing it for us. Our future depends on these routes staying open. Your father gave us his blessing and his backing in America, but I need to make sure our feet are planted firmly here in Asia. I will only be gone for a few days. 5 at most." Daphne looked at him, searching his face, letting him see the devoted wife who trusted her husband implicitly. "Promise me you will rest a little while you are there," she said softly. "I promise," Dong-wook said with a smooth laugh. "I will call you as soon as I land." He leaned down, kissing her once more, a quick, routine kiss that lacked the heat it used to have years ago. He turned, grabbed his leather briefcase from the couch, and walked toward the private elevator. The heavy metallic doors slid open, and with a soft chime, Dong-wook vanished into the shaft. The moment the elevator doors closed, the gentle, soft expression on Daphne's face completely evaporated. Her eyes turned to cold, calculating obsidian. She set her coffee cup down on the table without making a sound. Walking over to her private study, she unlocked a small hidden drawer beneath her mahogany desk and pulled out an encrypted satellite laptop. She opened the private flight registry network, a tool her father's security team had built for her years ago back in Chicago. She typed in the call sign of Dong-wook's private charter jet. The flight plan was registered, but the destination was not Singapore. It was Paris, France. 2 first-class seats booked under the names Mr. and Mrs. Kim. Attached to the booking was a digital receipt for a luxury penthouse suite at the Four Seasons Hotel George V, alongside a reservation for 2 at a private dining room overlooking the Eiffel Tower. Daphne leaned back in her leather chair, a slow, dark smile creeping onto her lips. She did not cry. She did not scream. Tears were for women who had no power, and Daphne had been raised by the most ruthless mafia syndicate leader on the East Coast. She picked up her secure phone and dialed a private number in New York. The line rang twice before a deep, gravelly voice answered. "Uncle Marcus," Daphne said, her tone smooth and steady. "It is time. Activate the secondary proxy protocols for the Seoul assets." "Are you sure, little bird?" Marcus asked, his tone heavy with protective authority. "Once we hit that button, there is no turning back. Your husband will lose his operational power within 48 hours. He just took the jet to Paris, Marcus," Daphne replied calmly. "He thinks I am sitting at home painting my nails while he spends my father's money on his mistress. Let him enjoy the lights of Paris. When he comes back, I want him standing on empty dirt." "Consider it done," Marcus said. "We are moving the board proxies now. Be careful over there, Daphne." "I am always careful, Uncle Marcus," she said, and hung up the phone. The next day, the sun broke over Paris in hues of soft gold and gray. In a lavish hotel suite filled with fresh roses, Dong-wook stood on the balcony, holding a glass of champagne. Behind him, a young woman wrapped in a fluffy white robe walked out onto the terrace. Nauri was young, beautiful, and wore a bright peach silk scarf wrapped around her shoulders. She slid her arms around Dong-wook's waist, resting her chin against his back. "You are quiet today, my love," Nauri said in a sweet, coaxing Korean. "Are you thinking about your business?" Dong-wook turned around in her arms, smiling down at her as he brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "I am thinking about you," he lied smoothly. "I was just thinking about how much happier I am here with you than back in Seoul." "Then why do we keep hiding?" Nauri asked, pouting slightly as she looked up at him. "You promised me that once the American money cleared, you would divorce her. You said she was just a business arrangement." "She is a business arrangement," Dong-wook reassured her, kissing her forehead. "Her father controls the shipping lines in North America. Without her signature, my elders would never have given me full control of the syndicate board. But we are almost there, Nauri. In a few weeks, I will have transferred all the core assets into my private holdings. Once that is done, Daphne becomes useless to me. I will send her back to Chicago with a nice settlement, and you will be the only woman standing by my side." Nauri giggled, resting her head against his chest. "I brought a special sky blue dress for tonight," she whispered teasingly. "You promised you would take me to the Lock Bridge." "Anything you want, my sweet girl," Dong-wook murmured. "Anything you want." Later that night, miles away in Seoul, Daphne stepped into the sleek, darkened conference room of the Baekho Syndicate's main headquarters. She was not wearing her soft peach home attire tonight. She wore a tailored, double-breasted crimson-red suit that fitted her like armor. Behind her walked 2 massive men in crisp black suits, her father's most trusted enforcers who had arrived from Chicago on a private flight 6 hours ago. Sitting around the long oval table were 6 elderly Korean men, the true power brokers behind Dong-wook's empire. They looked up in surprise and annoyance as the door swung open. "Mrs. Kim?" The eldest board member, Elder Park, said in surprise. "What is the meaning of this? Your husband is currently in Singapore handling syndicate affairs. This meeting is for board members only." Daphne walked to the head of the table, placing both hands on the dark wood surface. Her voice was cool, velvety, and commanded immediate attention. "My husband is not in Singapore, Elder Park. He is in Paris, sitting in a $3,000 a night hotel room, drinking vintage wine with a girl named Nari." The room fell into a shocked, tense silence. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Daphne did not wait for them to process it. She motioned to her enforcer, who opened a leather briefcase and slid thick, bound folders in front of every single elder at the table. "Inside those folders," Daphne continued calmly, "you will find proof that over the last 18 months, Dong-wook has siphoned over $40 million from the syndicate's shared treasury. He did not use that money to expand your routes. He used it to buy luxury penthouses in Paris, real estate in Jeju Island under his mistress's name, and to clear his own personal gambling debts in Macau." Elder Park's hands trembled as he flipped through the bank records, seeing the exact account numbers and forged signatures. This is treason against the board," Park whispered, his voice shaking with anger. "Dong-wook used my family's name to guarantee your safety," Daphne said, leaning in closer. "He told you that my father backed his every move. But my father backed me. Not him. As of 3 hours ago, my father's holdings have purchased 70% of your syndicate's debt. Dong-wook does not own this empire, gentlemen." "I do." Elder Park looked up at her, seeing the absolute authority in her dark eyes. "What do you want from us?" he asked quietly. "I want you to stay quiet," Daphne said, a cold, sweet smile gracing her lips. "Let him enjoy his trip to France. Let him think he is the smartest man in the world. When he returns, you will vote to strip him of his title and hand the syndicate command to me. If you do that, my father will double your distribution profits in America. If you warn him, I will pull every dollar of liquidity out of this city by midnight, and your syndicate will collapse into bankruptcy before sunrise." The elders looked at the papers, then looked at Daphne's enforcers standing like stone towers behind her. Elder Park slowly closed his folder and bowed his head slightly toward her. "We hear you, Mrs. Kim," Park said. "The board stands with you." A few days later, the sun was setting over the city of Paris, casting a romantic purple and gold hue across the river Seine. Dong-wook walked along the famous Pont de Arts bridge, holding Nari's hand. Nari was wearing her stunning sky-blue dress, her laugh echoing softly in the cool evening air. In her hand, she held a heavy gold padlock engraved with their initials. "This is where lovers lock their hearts forever," Nari said excitedly, leaning over the wooden railing. "Look at how many locks are here, Dong-wook." Dong-wook smiled, taking the lock from her hand. He snapped it onto the metal mesh wire of the bridge, clicking it shut with a satisfying sound. "There," he said softly. "Now you are locked to me forever." Nari wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him deeply right there on the bridge. "I love you so much," she whispered against his lips. "Is that right?" A calm, smooth voice echoed from behind them. Dong-wook froze. The voice was familiar. Too familiar. It was a voice he had heard every single morning for the last 4 years, but it sounded completely different now. It did not sound like his quiet, sweet wife. It sounded like authority. Dong-wook slowly turned around, his heart slamming against his ribs. Standing just 10 feet away on the pedestrian bridge was Daphne. She looked breathtakingly powerful, wearing a sweeping, floor-length deep purple coat over a crisp white silk dress. Her dark hair was pulled back into a flawless, sharp style, and her face was completely unreadable. Standing on either side of her were two tall men in black suits, their hands folded neatly in front of them. "Daphne?" Dong-wook stammered, the color instantly draining from his face. What are you doing here? I thought you were in Seoul." Daphne took 2 slow, measured steps toward them, her heels clicking softly against the wooden planks. She looked at Nari, who was shrinking back behind Dong-wook in confusion and fear, then looked down at the gold padlock on the railing. "I came to enjoy the scenery, Dong-wook," Daphne said, her voice smooth, sweet, and entirely without anger. "Paris is so lovely this time of year, isn't it? Much nicer than Singapore." Dong-wook swallowed hard, trying frantically to regain his composure, to put on his charming mask. "Daphne, listen to me," he began, stepping forward and opening his hands in a helpless gesture. "This is not what it looks like. This woman, she is an associate's daughter. I was just escorting her." Daphne raised one delicate hand, stopping his words instantly. "So you thought you could play me?" Daphne asked, her voice dropping into a low, velvet rhythm that carried absolute control. "You really thought I was that blind, Dong-wook? Who is this woman, Dong-wook?" Nari demanded, grabbing his arm frantically. "Tell her to leave us alone." Daphne did not even look at Nari. She kept her eyes locked on Dong-wook, watching the realization dawn behind his eyes. "You built a very pretty lie, Dong-wook," Daphne continued, her tone light, almost conversational. "You used my father's connections to expand your syndicate. You used my family's money to buy your way into the top circles of Seoul. And then you brought your little secret here, using my house accounts to pay for her hotel rooms. You thought you were playing chess, darling. But you forgot who taught you how to move the pieces." Dong-wook's eyes widened in sheer panic. "What did you do, Daphne? What did you do back in Seoul?" Daphne smiled, reaching into her purple coat and pulling out a small black leather file. She tossed it onto Dong-wook's chest, and he caught it with trembling hands. "Open it, my love," Daphne said softly. "It is your itinerary for the rest of the week. If you are enjoying this intense showdown, please hit the like button right now and leave a comment telling us what you think Daphne should do next. Subscribe to the channel to make sure you do not miss the final resolution of this story." Dong-wook's hands shook uncontrollably as he flipped open the leather binder. The first page was an emergency notice from his primary bank in Seoul. All personal and corporate accounts under his name had been frozen by order of the syndicate board. The second page was an eviction notice for the penthouse in Gangnam, effective immediately. The third page was a revocation of his private jet clearance. This is impossible," Dong-wook whispered, his voice cracking. "The board would never do this. Elder Park would never allow you." "Elder Park was the first one to sign the transfer papers, Dong-wook," Daphne interrupted smoothly. "You see, while you were busy buying silk dresses and gold padlocks in Paris, I was back home showing your board members the real numbers. I showed them where their money was going. They do not like thieves, Dong-wook. And they especially do not like foolish men who endanger their profits for a mistress." Nari grabbed the binder from his hands, looking at the Korean text, her eyes widening in horror. "Dong-wook, what is this? My card was declined at the boutique this morning. What is happening?" Dong-wook ignored her, stepping closer to Daphne, his eyes pleading, desperate. "Daphne, please, we can talk about this. I made a mistake, okay? I was foolish. But we are married. Your father would not want you to destroy everything we built. My father was the one who handed me the master ledger 3 days ago, Dong-wook, Daphne said softly, leaning in close so only he could hear her. My father told me to make sure you had nothing left when I was finished with you. She turned her back on him, stepping toward the bridge exit. Where are you going? Dong-wook shouted, taking a step after her, but Daphne's two enforcers instantly stepped in front of him, blocking his path like a brick wall. I am taking the private jet back to Seoul, Daphne called over her shoulder, her voice floating back on the cool evening air. You and your friend will have to find your own way home. I hear commercial coach flights are very humbling. Daphne walked away into the Parisian dusk, leaving Dong-wook standing on the bridge in total ruin, the sound of Nari's panicked sobbing filling the air behind him. The rain over Seoul had stopped by the time Daphne's private jet touched down at Incheon International Airport, leaving the city slick and reflective under the harsh glow of neon signs. Daphne stepped off the plane wearing a tailored, double-breasted purple suit that practically radiated authority. Her father's chief enforcer, a towering man named Marcus, walked half a step behind her, carrying a sleek leather briefcase containing the final corporate transfers. How is our guest handling his flight back? Daphne asked smoothly, adjusting the collar of her white silk blouse as they walked toward a waiting black luxury sedan. Marcus offered a rare, grim smile. Commercial economy class out of Paris was fully booked, Miss Daphne. Dong-wook and his young lady had to take a 14-hour connecting flight through Doha. Third row from the back, right next to the restrooms. His personal cards were all declined at the gate, so he had to use whatever cash he had left in his wallet just to pay for their baggage fees. Daphne chuckled softly, stepping into the back seat of the car as the door was held open for her. How humiliating for the great boss of the Beko syndicate. Is the board assembled? They have been waiting in the executive penthouse since midnight, Marcus replied, closing the door and sitting across from her. Every single elder is present. They are terrified of what your father might do to their distribution lines in Chicago if they step out of line. They are ready to sign over full operational command to you the moment you walk through those doors. Good, Daphne murmured, looking out the tinted window as the city lights blurred past. A foolish man thinks power is given through a title. A wise woman knows power is taken through leverage. 2 hours later, the heavy oak doors of the syndicate's top-floor conference room swung open. The 12 elders of the Beko board instantly stood up, bowing deeply as Daphne walked into the room. She did not take a seat at the side or wait for an invitation. She walked directly to the head of the massive mahogany table, sliding smoothly into the high-backed leather chair that had belonged to Dong-wook for the last 6 years. She rested her elbows on the polished wood, joining her hands together. Good evening, gentlemen, she said in her calm, melodic voice. Today, we begin a new era for our organization. Before Elder Park could speak, the doors at the far end of the hallway burst open with a loud bang. Dong-wook stumbled into the room, exhausted, disheveled, and pale. His sharp white suit was wrinkled and stained from the long flight, his tie undone, and his hair messy. Behind him, Nari hovered near the doorway, looking terrified in her rumpled peach dress, clutching her luxury handbag like a shield. Daphne! Dong-wook roared, his voice hoarse with desperation and rage as he marched toward the table. What is the meaning of this? Why are my keycards revoked? Why are my security guards refusing to take my orders? Elder Park stood up, his face hardening into a strict, cold mask. Lower your voice, Dong-wook. You are no longer in command here. You have brought shame upon this board and stolen from our shared treasury to fund your disgraceful lifestyle in Europe. Stolen? Dong-wook laughed bitterly, pointing a shaking finger at Daphne. She set me up. She used her father's influence to manipulate our accounts. You elders are bowing to an outsider, a woman who does not even carry Korean blood. This syndicate belongs to my family. Daphne slowly leaned back in her leather chair, her dark eyes remaining completely calm as she looked at her husband's pathetic state. Your family built a neighborhood gang, Dong-wook, Daphne said, her voice dropping into that sweet, velvety tone that carried lethal authority. My family built a global enterprise. When you married me, you thought you were climbing a ladder to take my father's wealth. You forgot who owned the house the ladder was leaning against. She gestured lightly with her hand, and Marcus stepped forward, opening his leather briefcase and sliding two thick sets of legal documents across the long table toward Dong-wook. What is this? Dong-wook spat, refusing to touch the paper. The first document, Daphne explained smoothly, is your unconditional resignation as chairman of the Baekho syndicate. The second document is a full relinquishment of all corporate holdings, real estate assets, and proxy shares back to the board. And the third is our divorce decree. Dong-wook stared at the papers, his chest heaving as reality finally slammed into him with the weight of a freight train. I won't sign it, he whispered, shaking his head frantically. You can't force me out. I have loyal men on the streets. I have enforcers who answer only to me. Daphne smiled, a small, elegant tilt of her lips that did not reach her eyes. Marcus, please bring in our new head of security. The side door opened, and a sharp Korean man in a dark black suit stepped into the room. It was Min-jun, Dong-wook's longtime right-hand man and personal bodyguard, the man who had stood by Dong-wook's side for over 10 years. Dong-wook's eyes widened with a sudden spark of hope. Min-jun, he gasped, taking a step toward him. Tell these old men to clear the room. Call our boys from the Gangnam district right now. Min-jun walked past Dong-wook without making eye contact. He stopped beside Daphne's chair, bowed 90 degrees to her, and handed her a sleek set of master encrypted keys. The street commanders have all been reassigned, Mrs. Kim, Min-jun reported respectfully in a firm, steady voice. All loyalties have been transferred to your father's local oversight team. The Gangnam district is secure under your command. Dong-wook felt his knees go weak. He stumbled backward, catching himself on the edge of the conference table. Min-jun. How could you? I made you. I trusted you. You trusted your own arrogance, Dong-wook, Min-jun said quietly, looking at his former boss with pity. You spent months lying to your wife, risking our entire shipping network for a mistress, while Mrs. Kim was quietly paying off our crew's medical debts and guaranteeing our safety with her family's resources in America. You abandoned us long before she took over. Nauri let out a soft gasp from the doorway, realizing the full scope of what was happening. She looked at Dong-wook, no longer seeing a powerful, wealthy mob boss, but a broken man with nothing left to his name. She took 2 slow steps backward, quietly slipping out into the hallway and running toward the elevators, abandoning him without saying a single word. Dong-wook turned his head slightly, watching his mistress run away, but he didn't even have the energy to call her name. The illusion was completely shattered. Daphne picked up a sleek black fountain pen and set it neatly on top of the divorce papers. I am not a cruel woman, Dong-wook, Daphne said softly, her tone almost gentle. I have left one small bank account active under your name. It contains $50,000. Enough for you to rent a modest apartment in the outer suburbs and start a quiet life. But your reign in Seoul is over. If I refuse to sign? Dong-wook whispered, his voice cracking as tears of anger and defeat finally pooled in his eyes. Daphne leaned forward, resting her hands on the table, her gaze turning as cold as liquid nitrogen. If you refuse to sign, my father's enforcers will handle this matter outside of a courtroom. And I assure you, my father does not have my patience. You will sign the papers, you will leave this building, and if I ever see your face in Gangnam again, you will disappear so completely that even the ocean won't find your bones. The silence in the boardroom was absolute. The elders sat like statues, watching the broken young man who had once thought he was invincible. Dong-wook's hand trembled violently as he reached down and picked up the gold pen. He looked at Daphne one last time, searching her face for any trace of the sweet, submissive wife who used to adjust his tie every morning. He found nothing but the cold, calculating eyes of a queen who had just claimed her crown. With a shaky breath, Dong-wook pressed the pen to the paper, signing his name across every designated line, giving away his title, his fortune, and his legacy in 3 quick strokes of ink. He dropped the pen onto the wood, turned around with his head bowed, and walked out of the boardroom in total silence. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind him, sealing his fate forever. If you enjoyed this satisfying tale of power, betrayal, and ultimate revenge, please take a second to hit the like button and leave a comment below letting us know your favorite part of Daphne's plan. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next high-stakes storytelling video. Elder Park slowly stood up from his chair, bowing deeply toward the head of the table. What are your orders for the syndicate moving forward, Chairman Kim? Daphne picked up her glass of sparkling water, taking a calm, measured sip as she looked out over the sparkling expanse of Seoul below. First, we clean up the accounting irregularities, Daphne instructed, her voice crisp and commanding. Second, we double the security protocols on our American trade routes. And third, notify my father in Chicago that the Seoul branch is officially under my management. Yes, Chairman, the elders chimed in unison, bowing their heads in deep respect. Daphne walked over to the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, looking out at the city that now belonged to her. Dong-wook had thought he was playing a game of heart and deception, but he had forgotten the most important rule of the underworld: never mistake a woman's quiet love for weakness. She had watched him, waited for the perfect moment, and when he least expected it, she had taken everything he held dear. A slow, triumphant smile spread across Daphne's face as she watched the morning sun rise over the skyline, casting brilliant rays of gold and red across the city. The game was over, and the queen was finally on her throne.